They're not spending money looking just for the hell of it. They know that they're going to be allowed to mine that land.
Mr Chair.
Eugenia Sage.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This part of the bill is deeply troubling because it's consistent with the changes elsewhere in the bill to deliberately weaken the powers of the Minister of Conservation, and it establishes a new process, as Moana Maki has highlighted, where it will be the Cabinet, through Order in Council, rather than the Minister of Conservation, which makes decisions about how reserves should be classified and what their protected status should be. There is a large area of conservation land which is stewardship land. It means it hasn't got the additional protection that reserve status as scientific reserve or a nature reserve would provide. And that reserve status does provide additional statutory protection when you have applications to do activities in the reserve areas which might destroy the vegetation, modify the habitat values. So the Reserved Act is providing that stronger statutory protection for areas that have got the ecological or scenic values that deserve reserve status. And so what this part of the bill is doing is making sure that it is a Cabinet decision rather than a decision by the Minister of Conservation, as it is at the moment, to gazette the reserve and to improve the protected status. And areas which would be affected are potentially a large area of forest south of the Cook River in South Westland, which is part of the South West New Zealand World Heritage Area, which the Department of Conservation was charged with undertaking a national park investigation into in the late 80s, but it never had the resources to do that. So now none of that land could be reclassified as scientific or reserve or nature reserve without it going through Cabinet. And that will mean, of course, that there will be other ministers that will object to that, and we will have what happened when Kahurangi National Park was established. Areas that have mineral potential, like Sam's Creek, being excluded from the park, even though they should be part of the park because of their ecological values, and areas like the Mokanui catchment also being excluded because there was lobbying at the time the national park was established to exclude these areas, even though the investigations by the Conservation Authority had clearly shown that areas like the Mokanui had status that deserved to be part of the national park. So, Mr Chair, the problem here is that it's the technical, scientific and ecological reasons for a change in the land status are being dismissed, and you are getting political considerations of whether that land can be available for exploitation, which will determine whether it's gazetted as a nature reserve or a scientific reserve, or whether the protected status is upgraded. And similarly with wilderness areas, because that provides for the same process. The Paparoa Wilderness Area, when it was established, was controversial because of the mineral potential. So we will see, as has happened with the marine reserves on the west coast, where you get commercial industry involved, they will lobby hard behind closed doors and not through the public process, and the areas that are finally protected will shrink quite considerably. But one of the very troubling things in this part of the bill, it's in clause 68(9), is where it talks about a change to the classification or the revocation of the reservation status. That potentially means that areas that go up into Schedule 4 that are supposedly protected, if the land status is changed, they will be open for mining. And I think that is what the government's intention is. It says it's about permanent protection through Schedule 4, but this clause means that that land status can be revoked. It may not be revoked over the whole of a reserve area, but it could potentially be revoked over part of an area which, if it's in Schedule 4 at the moment, would then be opened up and available for mining. So this provision, which allows for revocation without any obvious public process, is a potential way the government can undermine the protected status of a lot of areas of conservation land. Certainly there are some criteria in clause 68(10) that the Minister must be satisfied the reserve is no longer suitable for the purposes of its classification, but the wording in that clause is very general, or for any other similar clause. That's very broad. That's giving the Minister a lot of discretion when he or she is bullied by Cabinet colleagues that the economic benefits, the jobs, Mr Chair...
Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Chair. The jobs that will be created outweigh the ecological values of that land. And that's because that's what this government is about. Jobs, short-term jobs, exploitation, rather than having areas properly protected, getting the legal recognition that they deserve because of their biodiversity, landscape and habitat values that would see them classified as a scientific reserve or a nature reserve. And the fact that this applies to wilderness areas is also really troubling, because wilderness areas were established to provide areas which don't have tracks or huts, where people can experience nature in a completely unmodified way, can rely on their own resources. They come from a tradition of recognising that there are some areas that we want to set aside that are totally undisturbed, except by factors like climate change. So with this provision in relation to wilderness areas, it's potentially going to reduce the ability to have large wilderness areas that protect the capacity for people to walk, to climb, to enjoy those areas that are untracked, to camp. And again, it's just this whole weakening of the minister's powers that the bill is all about, and this is one of the worst provisions of the bill for that. Thank you.
The Honourable Mary Ann Street.
Thank you very much.